People always want their leader to be present, to understand them as a person, and understand how to identify skill sets. And I think that's a key skill set to bring to the table.
Welcome to episode 222 of the Pathways to Success, where we have conversations with inspiring leaders about their business and keys to personal and professional success. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have an outstanding show in store for you today. It is my pleasure to welcome Tim McPherson, President and CEO of HSS, Hospitality Staffing Solutions. Tim, welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you?
Very good. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for joining us here in Dallas today. You drove up here from Austin.
It sure did, and it's changed a lot in between.
Yeah.
Never saw a traffic jam in Waco before, but I experienced that last night.
And now you did. Okay, awesome. Well, Tim, I want to jump into things and begin to introduce you to our audience and to tell your story. So you're the president and CEO of HSS. If you would, share with us, what is Hospitality Staffing Solutions?
Hospitality Staffing Solutions is a temporary employment agency. Everybody knows there's temporary staffing firms that do IT placement, that do engineering, blue-collar skill sets, and Hospitality Staffing Solutions is a niche within blue-collar staffing. We are the #1 supplier on a national level to all the major hotel brands, really focusing on 4- and 5-star resort properties, a Four Seasons, a Ritz-Carlton, a JW Marriott. Those type of brands are the ones that have the most rooms, the most luxurious properties, and obviously have the most staff involved in back of house operations, which is our core service. We provide back of house, meaning the people running behind the scenes, making everything happen to make the guests most comfortable in their rooms, cleanliness, customer service, food and beverage service in the front of house. So a wide variety of skill sets that we provide to the hotel industry.
And I know you have won a number of different awards. What were some of the most prominent ones that you guys have?
We're recognized as one of the top 100 staffing companies in the entire industry in the United States. We're also one of the top 20 in the blue-collar space. I never knew the niche of hospitality staffing existed. For my career, really spanned from engineering and IT placement going back to the 80s. It's a really unique position we're in. We are the #1 within the hospitality niche on a national level.
Awesome. So what would you say is the mission statement of HSS?
The mission statement is we provide the best talent to our clients. And what that means is we are continually recruiting, screening applicants, and selecting that 1 out of 5 people that walks in the door to identify who's got the right personality and skill set that can move into the hotel industry. It is a very unique interaction with guests that you need. Every hotel brand has specific guidelines for how you interact or not interact with guests based on where you're at in the hotel. The key to our success and our mission is to be able to select the right talent for the right hotel. That's really what we consider key to our success. Our other mission is to be a compliant company, meaning we do all the proper employment practices from employment screening, background checks, drug testing, anything our client needs. We have great systems and a fantastic back office that helps manage those services.
Okay. And you shared a few different things. What else comes to mind when it comes to what your business is doing uniquely different than other hospitality staffing firms? What else do you think is the key to success there?
I think it's the management personnel in our field organization. We have 75 branch offices across the country. Most of our internal staff grew up in the hotel industry, so their ability to interact, motivate, and lead and train people into their roles is really key to our success. We don't just put a body in place and leave them alone. We spend a lot of time during the orientation, the training, on site to make sure that person is comfortable, because the turnover is very high in the hospitality industry. It's not for everybody, but if people can get past that first 30 to 60 days in the environment, they have a lot better chance to succeed long term.
Okay. And as the CEO who sets the vision for the organization, what is your vision for HSS?
Vision is to dominate the industry. I always
Okay.
like being number one. We're in that solid position now. We continue to diversify to use the same type of personnel and penetrate other industries. So we call that our non-core market. It's really exciting to me to see the transition of the people we recruit in those skill sets moving into other industries that utilize similar talent. So that's my goal, is to be number one in hospitality and also to grow our relationships with companies that aren't hotels.
And it sounds like you're certainly on your way to doing that.
Absolutely.
So Tim, before we learn more about your personal story and journey to success, is there anything else worth mentioning about HSS?
We've been on a very crazy road. I can tell the history of the company. When we were founded, the pandemic had a significant impact on the company and really changed the entire dynamics. You know, we lost 90% of our revenue in 1 month, going back to 2020 when all the hotels shut down in the pandemic. So we went from 250 million in revenue to 25 million in revenue like that. Through our efforts and rebuilding and moving into other industries, we're 50% larger than we were before the pandemic. So I think that's a real point of pride for the entire organization.
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay, cool. So Tim, let's jump into your story now. And the reason why I started the show, because I was always fascinated with what have people done to become successful, and I think success leaves clues. So I want to begin to find out what are some of those commonalities and story points that can help predict, like, what happened in your early years to the results that you're producing today. So Tim, where are you originally from?
I grew up in the Chicago area, spent the first 19 years of my life in the Chicago area. My hometown is called Wheaton, Illinois. It's a large suburb in the western side of the Chicagoland area.
Okay, and what was it like growing up there?
Wheaton is the idyllic suburb in Chicago. Most churches per capita at that time of any small town in America. We had about 30,000 residents. We had about 45 churches. Wheaton's famous for being where Wheaton College is headquartered. That's Billy Graham Center. So it was a dry town, no alcohol available anywhere within the city limits. You had to leave Wheaton to drink. So obviously growing up there, what you didn't have, you wanted. So kids that grew up in Wheaton were continually pushing the boundaries a little bit of this environment that we grew up in.
So tell us a little bit about your family and upbringing.
Upbringing was very interesting. Grew up in the 60s and 70s. Had five children in the family. My mother had 5 kids by the time she was 22 years old. My father was an early employee with IBM, which required a lot of business travel at that time. So God bless Mom for handling 5 kids and raising us all safely in the 60s and 70s. A lot different environment than raising children today. You said about my family itself, come from a family of geniuses, I would say. Dad's very smart. My older brother is extremely intelligent, like valedictorian level in high school, MBA by the age of 22, walked into a great job. My younger brother by a year, very similar, went to University of Illinois. I was the black sheep of the family, I would say.
And how were you the black sheep of the family?
Well, first of all, 5 kids in the family. Kevin, Kurt, Keith, Kelly, and then there's Tim. So that's a good sign that I was born to be the black sheep. Obviously, following an older brother that was that intelligent and obviously outwardly intelligent, like straight A's through school, I would say with barely even trying. Certainly set an expectation when I came into school as the kid right behind Kevin is he's got to be as good as Kevin is. So I think I set my course in a different way. But the advantage of having a very intelligent brother, by the time I was 4 years old, he taught me how to read and write and do math. So by the time I walked into kindergarten, they wanted to skip me up 1 or 2 grades because I knew I had that much intelligence built into me, I would say, from parenting, and also from my older brother, taking me as the younger brother and teaching me a lot of basic skills and putting me ahead of the curve intelligence-wise when I entered my school life.
Interesting. But something you're public about is that you did not go to college. You don't have a degree. Is that right?
I went to college. I had a lot of fun in college. I went to I went to 4 colleges, and I have a total of about 20 credit hours.
So what was the decision? What happened at that point that, I guess it didn't make sense for you to continue, to finish?
Exactly. You try, you try again. I think while college education, obviously in certain industries or IT, engineering, it requires dedication within the educational field of their choice. I found college to be a great experience to build personality and skill set. Had a lot of fun, but also built a lot of lifelong relationships in my time in college. And no one treats you seriously until you're out of college age, I think, and entering an employment field.
Okay. And still sticking with the theme of your family, what were some of the most impactful lessons that perhaps your parents taught you?
Starting with my father, I think it's the competitive nature that he raised us in. He dreamed that all his kids would be professional athletes. My name is Timothy Darrell McPherson, so he wanted me to be a football player, TD McPherson. So continually there was that strive and competition in sports and team sports that I really think was core as I look back. Some of your questions, Julian, were pretty intriguing and made me think back what in my childhood led to my success in the future. And I do think that competitive nature my father built between the kids and also getting us involved in team sports, I think was a couple foundations that helped me in my business career eventually.
So do you think competitive drive is sort of innate or is it cultivated? What do you think?
I think it's cultivated.
It's cultivated? And what are things do you think we could do to cultivate that?
I think it's the identity of the person and making sure, in the screening process to find someone that's shown that drive and that competitive nature. When you talk about building a company and building a team, those are the things that I think are key.
Interesting. Well, for those who do hiring here at Headstorm, what are some of the things what's your best hiring tip to screen for that type of personality?
I think it's asking them what they did to create, where they were when they were young, and giving examples of success, not necessarily in their career field, but things they did outside that made them successful or what drives them.
Okay. Was there anything early on, because I'm a really big believer that everyone has unique gifts and talents, right? But was there anything early on that you began to realize that, man, I'm good at this thing, that ultimately bore fruit in your professional career?
I think my love of the English language and writing and reading, I think those were key things in my childhood that continued on throughout my career, as always being someone that liked to gather information and retain that as well.
The love for the English language.
Writing,
okay.
And reading. Those were two of the things I really, while I wasn't very good in school, those were always my top courses. And history as well. I love history, American history and world history. So I think that constant seeking knowledge and information that may not be applicable to what you're doing in your job, but creates a more rounded experience for an individual that helps build an organization.
And what would you say was the first time you saw that love for the English language and quest for knowledge had utility in your career?
First job was 16 years old, wrote for the local newspaper.
That's okay.
So I was a basketball player that was tall as a youth, but wasn't tall enough at junior year of high school to keep playing basketball. Got a job as a writer for the local newspaper and wrote basketball and sports articles for 2 years. So that was taking that love and applying it outside of the school environment and seeing my name in a newspaper. I loved having that byline, even though it's a short-lived career as a journalist.
So far what I'm seeing is that you actually you were born into a family that did kind of have a hand in kind of cultivating your character. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I do think, like I said, being the black sheep of the family, without the education, the drive, knowing exactly what career I wanted to go into, I think that put the chip on my shoulder to fight to be the best at whatever I did. And I think that's one of the keys of growing up in a large family and finding your own niche when you get out in the world.
So the little bit of a chip on your shoulder. Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. So I do want to move more now into your business career and see what the lessons we can learn there. But anything else that you can reflect upon, anything else that happened in your youth and early 20s or whatnot that shaped your character that we could perhaps learn from and apply into our own lives?
Well, I do think high school is where education left me. I was a straight A student up until freshman year of high school, and I got in the environment where all the cliques and niches were. And that really bothered me, that people were segregated, the jocks, the burnouts, the brainiacs, the nerds. There's different things within the high school. And I was what was a floater. I had friends in every single niche, but I wouldn't call myself being in a niche itself. So I think that acceptance of people and not gravitating towards people that were just like me, but getting to know people outside of my immediate group of friends. I think that really helped me in the business world as I grew my branch office, my organization. I found it very easy to have conversations with people and be truly interested in what they were about as a person.
So I heard being open to the type of people that you associate with, and then also there was one more piece, that nugget that you said at the very end, and being really interested in the other individual, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And those are some things in building culture in organizations. One of my first roles at an executive level, I found myself in a company that had no diversity. It was more cookie cutter approach. Racial diversity was not there. Ethnic diversity was not there. And that was one thing I set on the course to help grow the company, is really to bring in more diversity to every level in the organization, from branch level personnel up to executive level, to really round out the company more. With that, we grew from 60 million in revenue to 500 million in revenue within 7 years. So I do think that openness, willingness, and building diversity within an organization is critical to a company's success.
And Tim, how do you define diversity?
How do I define it?
Yeah.
Don't be judgmental on people, or don't bring in thoughts that someone without an education or a degree may not be the best employee you ever had.
Okay.
Because I lived that personally. I think a lot of companies may consider a pre-requirement to bring in a degree. So I do think that mix of educational background, obviously ethnic diversity, I think is very important as you represent your company out into the general population. Your company should be a mirror of that population of the entire United States, which means African American, Hispanic, how do you say the word? I can't think of the word to use right now, I'm sorry. Gender diversity.
Gender diversity, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
so I think a lot of those things play into building a very well-rounded team and sets a good image for the company as well.
Gotcha, okay. All right. Well, Tim, now I want to begin the part of telling your story, because you really do have an unconventional path to CEO. And I think looking early on at Tim's career, you probably wouldn't have guessed he would have become a great executive. And the fascinating thing about interviewing people who have achieved results is that results don't lie. And when they unpack the results, you can look backwards and you can see steps, a sequence. So I want you all to be like detectives to see, what did Tim do that allowed him to advance in his career, okay? So Tim, how does that story start, man?
Story starts when I dropped out of my fourth college. I found myself in Austin, Texas, tried the University of Texas, and that was the end. Blew me out of the water. Too many smart people like the ones in this room right now. Found myself way out of my element, but I loved Austin in the early 80s. It was really the place to be, and continues to be my favorite city in America. So being in Austin, went to work for a temporary agency because I needed work. That was my first exposure to the industry that I've succeeded in the course of my career. Jobs within the temporary staffing industry started as a payroll and administrative clerk at the Austin American-Statesman, the newspaper. Always loved journalism, loved reading. Temp agency said, would you like to go be a payroll clerk? And I was fairly good with numbers at the time, so I went to work as a payroll clerk. Convinced me why I didn't want journalism as a career, because I saw what journalists made and it was not very impressive. They really did it for the love of the industry. So, so doing that job introduced me to the temporary staffing industry as a whole. I went and applied. A company called Today's Temporaries in Austin was nice enough to hire me. Well, back in the 80s, it was a tradition. You'd have a beer bust on Friday on payday for all the temporaries. So second week on the job, I went to get my first paycheck, and I walk into the branch office, and clerical administrative agency, walk in, 90% female. I'm one of the 10% male, so I walk in, and the branch manager's there, a few years older than me, running the branch office, handing out beers and paychecks, and getting to know a very vibrant and female gender-based audience, which is very attractive to me. So I said, that really looks like a fun job to have. He's in the catbird seat and getting to know people on a social level. So I think that was one of the things that really intrigued me about the industry, was learning from him that he didn't have a college background either, and yet worked his way up within the industry. So I identified temporary staffing was definitely a fun place to be. Second job in temporary staffing, I went to work in the Austin power plant as an inventory clerk. So I'm working in a very industrial environment at the age of 22, first working on inventory projects and eventually working as a warehouse and shipping clerk within the power plant. So I did that for a full year until they wanted to hire me permanent. They had a 1-year cap on how long you could work in a power plant. And I went to a guy that had been there for about 6 years, was a couple years older than me, and had the nice new truck back in the day, looked like he really had it all together, and found out his pay rate working as a municipal employee was not much more than I was making as a temporary, which at the time was $4 per hour. Again, this is in the early 80s. So I decided this isn't where I need to be. That's not going to be enough to afford the lifestyle I want. So I went unemployed at the age of 23 years old, no job, and found the temporary staffing industry. And when I went to work for, a friend of mine had joined the industry as well up in Chicago with a company called TAD Technical and Engineering Staffing Firm. Quickly moved from recruiter to salesperson to a manager of a startup office. And I knew this person, and still lifelong friends with this person, but he said, I really think you'd be good in this business because your memory is outstanding. It's all about getting to know people, and I think this would be a great place for you to start. And we're opening a branch next month. So I waited out the time for the interview for my first toe in the door in the temporary staffing industry.
There's a lot there that I want to unpack. So
Well, you want to hear my first interview?
There's actually a thing that you said. You said you saw someone who also did not have a degree but was successful. So you saw a kind of a model that you could see in yourself. Did you have any kind of imposter syndrome about not having a degree and entering into the business world?
Imposter syndrome, what
Not
does that
feeling
mean?
good enough to be of a certain position?
I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I
Okay.
think it was finding that first thing I really loved doing. And, like when I first got my job in the staffing industry, 2 months into the job, my grandfather met with me. I forgot where we were, some family event. And I was telling him all about my job and everything I learned in 60 days. And Granddad told me, you're going to be very successful in this industry. I can tell. You finally found something. You got your toe in the door, and that's all you needed. And to have a passion for what you do is very important.
Okay.
So I think that identity and knowing I liked the looks of the temporary agency, I liked the environment, the agency people worked in, and then finding myself in it and in it to win it. It was really the time and dedication I spent in that first toe in the door, which was running payroll. We had no computers in the office. Think about the days. We had Rolodex and filing cabinets, and we're running a large temporary staffing agency, and I was at the forefront of the business by sitting at the front desk, greeting applicants, and running payroll 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. So I think the pathway within that industry, and it's very similar when you meet people in the staffing industry. No one goes to school to get in staffing, but everybody that gets into it loves it for life. You know it right away.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times younger professionals, they sometimes wonder, am I in the right career? Is this the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life? So how did you know this was the thing for you, and what can we learn from that?
I think learning that I had an ability and making some successes within my first couple of months, putting engineers and IT professionals to work when I never took an engineering or an IT course, and it was all about building relationships. All of a sudden I'm putting people to work that make 10 times as much money by the hour as I was making at the time, and they were coming to me to educate me on their career field, giving me the knowledge that made me more experienced and I would call dangerous as a recruiter. Also, my retention of information, my ability to store phone numbers in my head, that photographic memory, which is one of my skill sets, brought on from that family environment. I think that was the key to my success, and then really staying the course and working outworking everybody, not only within the office, but within the industry itself around the Austin market at the time was really, I think, key to my success, not looking to jump over to a different project, jump into a different role. Loved recruiting, said I'm going to be the best recruiter out there, and I'm going to put the time and effort into doing that, and did that on for the first 4 years of my career, was sitting at a recruiting desk just putting people to work.
So the thing that I'm getting from that is that you found your particular gifts and skill sets to be useful in this particular industry, and you saw it was making an impact for others. And here's the thing also, Tim actually has a photographic memory. He did not realize he had this ability until he started applying it in staffing, because they didn't have computers back then, right? There was no database, there was no ATS, there was a Rolodex. But he could just look at the Rolodex and program it into his mind. But that was the thing. A lot of times you don't necessarily know what your gifts are until you apply them towards something that has utility to it, to work. And I thought that was a fascinating takeaway. Tim, there's a part of your story that I'm hoping that you could tell that in the very beginning, it wasn't easy. You weren't always like CEO. There were times when you couldn't pay your electric bill and things were shut off.
No one knows that in their life, right?
But could you walk us through a little bit about that experience for you?
Well, I think that's that point of, I would call desperation, being in Austin, no job, no income, no money in the bank, no cable TV on, electricity turned off, and I'm put in the chair for that interview for that $4 an hour job that I've been waiting 6 weeks to have the interview. I think that was that cusp moment of my life where I had hit that rock bottom where I knew the only turn back was to go back home and live in my parents' house. But I really found that path in the door, and I think that we talked last night, you called it a desperate moment.
Yeah.
And I think that desperate moment led to a lot of internal drive and eventually led to great success within the staffing industry.
And you had no choice to succeed. Your bridges were kind of burned. You had to move in the right
Yep.
direction. Okay. So how did you first come to know that you were good at leading teams and leading people?
Well, I think the first was leading by example, working within a recruiting team at a branch office. You know, we started attracting major clients. Austin at the time was mostly a government town with a few major employers, IBM, Texas Instruments, some mainstay tech employers. Because we were faster and better at doing what we did, led by my efforts and my colleagues, people started gravitating towards me at the client level, that we became the chosen agency, you know, by our performance, by our personality, knowing they could call us at 6 in the morning or 9 o'clock at night and the phone's going to be answered with a live voice. You know, those were differentiators. So I became a leader within a small team of recruiters, and that was my first management position, was to get lifted up to actually direct a team of 7 recruiters as we grew the operations.
So it was learning the business. It was leading by example. So what is the best tip that you can give to us here who perhaps manage teams to be an effective manager to get the most out of people?
I think first, expect to work harder and demonstrate your, getting to work early and leaving late. And I know a lot of these things may have played into my career, things may be different for others, but I think demonstrating consistently that you're going to be the best at what you do and try to catch up to me. That's what was my leadership skill, was trying to drive people to be better. Also, keeping the ears open and the eyes open to be a mentor, even though there's one job order to fill and it's going to pay you $7 a week in commission. Your teammates may want to try to fill it, but I think sharing the knowledge and also being happy for others' successes, not being a grandstander and not being the one that it's me, and it's all about me and don't forget about me. I think key to being a good team leader or team member is realizing that the team's success is your success personally as well. And you will get the credit when your team succeeds. You know, it's not by putting your name out there personally or demanding to have that personal recognition. I think those are very important aspects of a good team leader that really wants people to succeed that are on the team, and not just to have themselves at the forefront of that.
Their success is your success. So let me ask you this, regardless of discipline, what would you say would be the top 3 skills someone should develop to grow their leadership ability?
Top 3 skills to grow leadership ability.
Yes.
I think being there is number one. I think people always want their leader to be present, to understand them as a person, and understand how to identify skill sets within how to lead a team is bringing out the best in each person on your team. I think that's a key skill set to bring to the table.
Okay. And you were I want to switch gears a little bit here to sort of the business side of things, specifically at HSS, like what you did. You mentioned like 250 million to 25, then back up to 380. So what happened here from the 25 to 380? What did y'all do differently to rebound?
Well, I think fortunately we were acquired 2 months before the pandemic at record high sales of 250 million. So God bless KBS as the company that bought us, because they were in the facility services industry, they were in logistics, they were in retail, and they were in business and industry. When they bought HSS, they wanted into the hospitality market as their fourth silo. At the same time, hospitality bottom fell out, and we had 7,500 workers we had just put on the streets because all the hotels were shut down. At the same time, due to the pandemic, all the logistics operations started growing significantly. The Amazons, the home delivery services, shopping from home became very common. So I say God bless KBS for buying us, because we were able to port our employees over into a different industry. At the time, we thought as a holding spot for them until the hotels opened back up, because no one knew when that was going to happen at the early phase of the pandemic. Saying that was our first key success during the pandemic and got us back on the growth track, was putting people to work outside the hotel market and having a home for them right away.
So after the acquisition, what would you say were some of your key decisions as CEO to get the company right back on track?
Identifying when everybody had to do furloughs and layoffs, identifying the best stages to do that in. We had obviously to reduce our internal staff, we had to cut others' hours, but really having that focus on who are your A players that are going to be we call it being in the trenches. Who do you want to take into the trenches with you to get through this? So it's really identifying that key talent and letting everybody know, while you may be a salesperson, a recruiter, or a manager, you're going to be doing everything and anything possible to help us survive this period of turmoil for the company. And as demonstrated on social media, you see our managers out disinfecting shelves at Walgreens, for instance. Everybody did that kind of work during the pandemic. And I thought that showed the spirit of the company that we were going to fight through the challenges that we had.
Willing to change and adapt to what was going on. Tim, did you have any mentors, and what would you say were the most important lessons that they may have taught you?
Well, I think my first and lifelong mentor was the person that hired me into the industry. Fantastic gentleman, Tom Gavin, I'll say his name. He was brand new to the temporary staffing field operation. He came out into the field in his mid-40s from a credit and collections management background, but at the corporate office, he was seeing the paychecks people in the field were making. So he said, I'm going to go try that, and really took a leap of faith that he could be successful out in the field, selling, recruiting, everything that he didn't do before, but he had the courage to come out in the field, had the courage to identify me and take me under his wing to teach me how to be a man, catch me when I made mistakes, support me, care about me as a person, and lifelong friend. Mid-80s now, lives in Florida. I still talk to him probably on a monthly basis to this day, even though he hasn't been my direct boss for 20 years.
What advice would you give our audience to go how to acquire a mentor?
How to acquire one? I don't know if you acquire one necessarily. It's being out there and meeting people, and you will know when you have your mentor. I think everybody finds one in time, but it does take time and networking. You can't sit in a shell and find a mentor. A mentor's not going to show up at your desk and say, I'm going to be your mentor. I think it takes being outward, not only within the company, but in the industry, in the community. There's a lot of ways to find mentors. And, I also had, people I related to outside the staffing industry that I thought were important to my personal growth as well.
One of the best pieces of advice that I was given was, in order to be interesting, you must be interested. And whenever you're passionate about doing something, you sort of kind of attract people your way. And I found that was a great way to find a mentor, and I think that's what happened with you as well. So Tim, I know we can learn from both successes and failures. What would you consider to be your biggest business failure, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, there's a lot of them, but
Okay.
one most recently was online staffing. You know, it's turned into a dominant feature of the staffing industry that there's a mobile device, there's an app, and that can be used for attracting candidates and scheduling and putting people to work. So I was all in on the concept. I was so excited about it. Got involved through industry associations, learned all about the path, and analysts saying here's what's going to go on in every part of the staffing market to become, to be driven to people choosing their own work schedule, taking assignment by assignment. It's basically the formation of the gig economy, and as it applied to the temp staffing world. So I was so excited about it. I got into hospitality staffing solutions in 2016. And we're going to do it. We're going to be the first in this market space to do it. And then realized from specific challenges we faced right away within our core business, I did not follow through and bring the expertise in because I was a little bit cautious, maybe not certain of myself in the technology space. I knew it was going to be a hit, but I didn't have that confidence to push it forward at the time, probably because I was new to private equity investors. And we had a budget and a path we were on. It was going to take a big expenditure. There's a little resistance from our core market of back of house because not necessarily do room housekeepers have a cell phone device, a smartphone on them all the time. Ran into a little resistance there and just dropped it and said this isn't for the industry. Well, 7 years later, we've really been run over in food and beverage staffing, on-demand staffing. It's hit our market hard, where I was the first one conceptually and involved in it, but I didn't see it all the way through. And now we're going to play catch up because of that.
And that was your biggest, okay.
Yeah, I would call that the biggest failure, that I see hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars passing me by because I didn't have the vision 7 years ago or the confidence to see that through.
And are you guys working on that now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, gotcha. Because I was about to say, I know of a company who can help you do something like that.
I know one too. I think we may be sitting around a group of people that could help in that way.
Well, let me just ask this then, since we have this kind of audience. What do you think is the biggest single problem in staffing that can be solved with technology innovation?
Well, I'm very intrigued by artificial intelligence and how to utilize that to make our recruiting operations more productive, because I worked from 7 in the morning till 10 at night when I was a recruiter, but I do think the use of artificial intelligence is really going to change the world of recruiting, because there's products coming out that are really going to change the world that can work 24/7 to help do all that core work, screening, reviewing resumes, matching against job orders, tying the buzzwords between the candidates, doing outreach, talking to a candidate. So I think the evolution of this may be happening very quickly. It was all over the staffing industry executive forum this year as a primary topic, and I really view that to be a world changer coming up on the technology side.
Gotcha, okay.
Even though you couldn't find me on ChatGPT last night.
So I don't know if y'all saw that. Okay, so on my LinkedIn post, I wrote, write something about Julian Placino, and it came up with this amazing bio, right? And here's Tim, awesome CEO, and he said, write something about Tim McPherson.
Oh, but you did Rob next. You did Rob next.
Oh, I did Rob Kelly last night. It had a great bio
it was just
for him.
going, a whole story about Julian, a whole story about Rob, and I said, what does ChatGPT know about me?
Yeah,
Not a word.
Not right. It was funny. And it was interesting because it strung together several Rob Kellys, and it said Rob worked at Deloitte, and he was like, I never worked at Deloitte. It was crazy, right? Anyway.
So I'm going to give credit to that to Delete Me, which is a tool that wipes out your internet presence. So Team Delete Me did a great job, but embarrassed me at dinner last night. I was nobody.
Right. Well, Tim, before we close on the last part of our conversation, which is your keys to personal success, what else? What is the best career advice that you could give to our audience here today?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about this during dinner last night, and I see it with new hires that we make. I think stay with what you're doing and become an expert at what you do. Don't look for that shinier job down the street that may pay $10,000 more a year or have a small bonus component that may be higher. Don't jump to that new job title right away. I'm a firm believer, as written in The Outliers, I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but spend the 10,000 hours to become an expert at what you do. And I think that jumping jobs may give some immediate reward financially or give you a shinier office, but not necessarily is that going to help your long-term career aspirations, because you are going to shine as soon as you become an expert in what you do. So I think that's the best advice I can give, and something that pains me because we spend time hiring, training people on our culture, our industry, introducing them to our clients, and they just buzz out the door. You know, they gather all that experience and go for that shinier position down the street rather than realizing, you know, that entry-level job they had could put them in the CEO seat if they stay with it.
So stick with the job. So it's like, I think Jim Rohn, he gave a piece of advice. He said, don't get a job for what you can get, but get a job for what you can become. But what you can become becomes greater when you stick to what you're doing and become a master of your craft. And from a recruiting perspective, I've just seen the best hires that I've ever made were the people who started someplace, worked their way up, gathered insights, skills, and capability that eventually they could bring to another company. So I really think that's great advice. So,
and I lived that experience personally, from starting as a payroll clerk at the branch office in a 1,000-person internal billion-dollar company. I was at the lowest rung internally and found myself in the CEO role by staying the course and learning each job as it went along.
Yeah, that's great. So Tim, I want to learn a little bit more about your philosophies when it comes to personal success. And we've got about 10 minutes to cover this. So how do you deal with fear? When you're afraid of something, how do you put yourself in a more resourceful state to combat that fear?
Go for it and learn from the bad experiences you have. You know, I was an introvert growing up and hated speaking. I loved writing and I loved reading, but I could not get up and talk in front of a group. So I think that having that fear and just plowing yourself into it until you become comfortable with it, I think that's my biggest fear, which unfortunately I'm experiencing again a little bit today with this room of very intelligent people here at Headstorm.
So feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with rejection?
Well, we're in the industry where there's a lot of competition, and if you can't handle someone saying no, it's going to drive you crazy at night because you're going to get rejected more than you're going to be accepted. I think the core skill set is understanding no never means no forever, and that stick-to-itiveness. And we are a sales-driven organization at every tier, and you can't hear no and consider that a personal rejection or a forever rejection. You have to stay the course, stay in contact, learn from why they said no, work on building out your organization or your pitch to others to make you more successful the next time you get a chance to get up to bat.
I think that's great advice, to learn from what happened. Don't take it personal, but kind of objectify it. Be like a detective, see what needs to work. I've tried to sell Lawrence a lot of different things, and he didn't buy most of them, right? But now we're doing some good stuff here. But it was because I listened to him, and I listened to what his pain was, and I recalibrated my capabilities to serve his need. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't try. I'm not saying this is about me, but it is the process that you just mentioned. So I think that's really, really great feedback. How do you deal with failure? When you do have a failure and it's just, there's nothing unobjective about it, how do you recover from that?
I'd say try again. I think accepting that the best hitter in baseball is going to have a 300 average. That means they succeed 3 times every 10 times they get up to bat. And again, it's that competition, sports nature, but understanding you're not going to be successful all the time. See something through to the point you've seen every angle, opening a new market, trying a new niche in the business, trying something new, but knowing when to stop that process and just accept that and know you're still good at what you do. And I always, as I've expanded organizations across the country, I say I bat 700. I'm successful 70% of the time. I don't dwell on those 30% of things that I failed at. I stay focused on putting more into the funnel or trying new ideas and new concepts more often.
Gotcha. Do you have any morning routines that sort of prime you for success?
Lots of caffeine.
Lots of caffeine, okay, right.
But that is when I do my personal reading. I tend to get up early, and that's my first hour of the day is spent gathering up on the news of yesterday, the news of today. I'm really a speed reader. I can absorb a lot of information quickly. It's probably hurt my eyesight a little bit, spending so much time on the mobile phone, and a couple thumb aches from too much scrolling, but that's really where I dive in. It's a lot of coffee in the morning and a lot of reading to get ready for the day.
Okay. What have you discovered to be your weaknesses, and how do you mitigate them?
Weaknesses in?
Weaknesses as in personal weaknesses, business weaknesses, things that are not your strengths.
I think weaknesses in building teams, find people that are smarter than you to fill in your gaps. Know what you're good at, but realize very quickly, if you're going to be successful and move up in an organization or as a team member, as a team leader, finding people to join your team that are better than you in many aspects. I think that's something I had a hard time when I first got into management jobs. I wanted to do everything and be better than everybody at everything they did, and worked myself to death, but really wasn't getting much. I was getting success, but I was burning myself out by trying to do too much rather than relying on experts. So I know I'm horrible at IT. I can work with Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. That's it. So I need people that not only have the skill sets that we need, but also more visionary in that area. Marketing, I'm a great writer, but I don't have that vision of social media and marketing, so I hire somebody that has that skill set, make sure I get the best of the best, and motivate that person on why we need them. And fortunately through that, I think I've brought together a great executive team everywhere I've been by having that realization that I can't do everything, and I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, ever.
Gotcha. So hiring people who are better than you at certain things and really surround yourself with great people. You're recruiting.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Always be recruiting.
Always be recruiting. That's my mantra. Tim, what is the best lesson you have learned in managing your personal finances?
Save, save, save. I think at the early stages of my career, contributed heavily into my 401k plan. Best advice early on is you start making commissions, bonuses. Don't consider that part of your income. That goes into savings as well. So I really think foundation is living within your means and not taking advantage of leaps in salary or pay. Keep that personal expenditures low enough. Like, you don't need that fanciest car, you don't need the fanciest house, you don't need to take on a lot of debt. Live within your means at every stage of your career. And then again, when you get to the stage that you've saved enough or your 401ks develop to that level, hire an expert to come in and do this. Nothing drives me crazier than someone that's in their office working and has a MSNBC and the stock ticker on their screen. It's like, what are you working for? Are you working for us, or are you watching your personal finances every day? So really leaving it to the experts, I think, has been the best of my success. It's afforded me the ability not to worry about personal finances because it's in somebody's hands. Someone's watching that for me, which lets me do what I'm most successful at, which is growing and producing high income for the company and myself through my core job.
I heard save, live within your means, and then ultimately hire somebody else who's an expert to do that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. What is the single best book that you've ever read that has helped you become successful in your career?
I've read a lot of books. I think the Outliers was a good reflection. That was kind of after the point I realized I was already well past having that expertise built from 10,000 hours of dedication. There's a book called Pick Up Your Own Brass. It was written by my mentor's brother that was deputy director with the FBI. That gives you an example of how to be a team leader that's supported by your team. The whole concept is FBI leadership, and the fact you never consider yourself above your team members as a leader. I mean, you do the work they do and show willingness and interest in every level of work being done in your organization that you lead or manage. So those are two very good ones.
Awesome. So Tim, we're about to close the conversation here. I want to close with a little bit of a fun kind of lightning round just to learn a little bit about your personality, so you can give us one-word answers.
Oh boy.
And then we'll kind of close out the conversation here, okay? So Tim, what's your favorite food?
Mexican food.
Okay.
Specifically tacos.
Specifically tacos, okay. What kind of music do you listen to?
Loud. Loud. Okay, heavy metal and gangster rap.
Oh, are you serious? What, if any, are you binge watching on streaming right now?
Right now, nothing.
Nothing? Okay.
My wife streams a lot of shows, so I pick up on them pretty often. I'd say in our house, it's a lot of cooking shows.
Cooking shows, okay. Guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. Why would I feel guilty about anything I find pleasure in?
Okay, awesome. Tim, what is something you are really proud of that no one really knows about?
The fact that we have an audience listening to me speak about my background and my success. I can't believe I found myself in this position in life.
Awesome.
What can I say?
Well, it was definitely well worth it. I think you've shared so much here with us. So last question here for you, Tim. The show is all about pathways to success. So how do you personally define what success is?
I don't think I found it yet, personally. I keep waiting for that moment that I say I've gone as far as I'm going to go. So I think just that constant striving and never feeling comfortable at any position. You know, I don't know when I'm going to feel that level of success personally. I don't know how to define that. I find success, I think, in watching teams grow, watching people I've hired develop in their careers. I get real internal satisfaction from that, hiring someone at a entry-level role and seeing them in my organization or another becoming a C-level executive. You know, and I have examples of that throughout my life and my career that gives me a lot of personal satisfaction, seeing my people develop. My people that I've worked with and counseled and coached and mentored, I get great thrill and satisfaction when they get that big house, when their kids graduate from college. You know, a lot of that becomes a feeling of satisfaction for me personally.
I think you just defined it. Your definition of success is helping others succeed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, close us out with one final piece of advice for everyone here. What is your best piece of advice for everyone in terms of to be successful, do this? What would you say?
Be present. That's all I can say. Be present and engaged. I think that ritual of having that morning routine, knowing when you're going to get to work and staying on course and doing it. It's been challenging during the pandemic. Remote work is not for me. I drive myself crazy bouncing between the home office walls, but I am dedicated to that point and available to my team members coast to coast, multiple time zones. I mean, you're being present and being in it to win it. You know, I think those are the best advice I can give people.
Tim, I think this was an outstanding conversation. I think we all learned a ton. If we could all please give Tim a round of applause. And Tim, one more thing, if you could close our audience out, if you would tell us all where to find you, connect with you online, learn more about HSS.
Our website is HSS Staffing, so 3 S's. HSSstaffing.com is our website. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Again, Tim McPherson. You pronounced it McPherson, but there is no fear in a McPherson. that was one of my father's favorite sayings, so I figured I'd drop that on you at the end here. So,
awesome.
God bless my father. Left us 2 years ago, so that's it.
Awesome. Well, Tim, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Julian, good to see you. Good to see you, kid.
Yeah. So glad to know you. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success. One more time for Tim McPherson.
Hey, you got it right.